A Sankarshan Joshi trip.
Hello, Vaishakh Dutt. Welcome back.
Hello, Joshi. Thanks for having me again.
I was really super excited to talk to you. In general, every time we meet, every time I talk to you, I am like super excited because I absolutely don't know what we are going to talk about. And it's always interesting. Like anytime I talk to you, the minimum amount of time we talk, every time we talk is 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That is a minimum.
Yeah. The equivalent is like, when some relative comes home and it's time to indicate and you keep talking. Yeah, I leave. Yeah. After Managod Melian Uta. Yeah. Anyway, they're like, at the gate, you end up speaking for half an
Yeah.
hour. It's like that.
Every 5 minutes, it's like, okay, chalo, like let's talk some other time. And then we ended up talking again, like another 5 to 10 minutes. Again, we say goodbye. You know, my dad actually liked our podcast because he's really interested in all those spirituality, all the spiritual stories and all that. Like after talking to you, my dad asked a lot about you because it seems like he knows a lot about these stories and it was pretty interesting.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And there were two instances where I thought about you. Okay, like two. Yesterday on the call, I told you one. So the other day
Yeah.
when I was eating my dinner, I thought about what you said on the last podcast. You said religions, like any religion, is like rules and guidelines for humanity to follow for betterment of human life. And then like I kind of said like rules, it kind of like sounds pretty it has a lot of like negative connotation. And the other day, so I made a rule for myself that I am not gonna look at any screens like mobile phones or TV post 10 o'clock because I know what is gonna happen. Like I know me and I know the pattern. So I end up either watching something and uh, and I end up sleeping like pretty late at like 2, 3 o'clock. So I have seen my pattern and I put this rule for myself, knowing if I don't follow this, what's gonna happen. So then I thought, fuck, like in this sense, like rules make sense. It's like now
Yeah.
I know what my negative pattern is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
yeah,
uh, need to put two guidelines out there, not guidelines. What is that called?
disclaimer.
Before disclaimers, yeah. The first disclaimer is this podcast is subject to interruption at any point of time because of my puppy. It can happen anytime. He might show up on camera, some shit might go down. But that's the first disclaimer. And the second thing is like, like opinions, thoughts, and like personalities change over time. So what I might have said in the last podcast might not be something that I believe in right now, and my opinions can change. I think
Will change, honestly.
yeah, and like I think honestly, unlearning is as important as learning. So to unlearn and to like rewire yourself every now and then, it's something that everyone must do. And like like what he said, where I kind of still do think more than rules, guidelines or something, where like each religion has set out something for people to follow, and I think some sense of that is required for people to stay in a community.
Yeah.
So for us to be in like I think it gives everyone a sense of identity. It's a good thing to have a sense of identity, right?
Yeah.
So if you end up following a certain set of guidelines which was laid out to you by a religion, I think it gives you a sense of belonging within your own community.
Yeah.
I think you would have observed this, right? Like let's say you meet a fellow Indian when you're abroad, and you know that like when you were brought up in a similar way. By being brought up, I mean like you had a similar guidelines that was set down to you by your parents when you're growing up.
There is
like,
context. Yeah,
there's context, and like there is some sort of similarity, and I guess that allows for people to get together and be as one. And as much as like it gives a sense of belonging to the people of the same category, I think it's really interesting and a beautiful thing when people understand the guidelines of other communities as well, So there's that sense of harmony coming into play, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing to watch when people who clearly have different, ethics or upbringings, bond over something similar or understand something and get together. It's nice to watch. You've seen those heartwarming pictures where, like in Maharashtra, where people were doing namaz during Ramadan, during under the Ganesha stall pandals or something like that, right? It's nice when things like that happen, I guess. But yeah, thing about rules, setting them for yourself, and that being, it's something that's an oxymoron in a certain sense. Jordan Peterson, he's a clinical psychologist.
I love that dude.
Yeah, so he has a book called
12 rules for life.
Yeah, so in that, he says that, in his in the introduction itself, he says accepting the rules and it's the way to freedom is something that he says. So it's an oxymoron that and an irony that rules are the way to freedom. Once you accept your rule, that's what takes you to freedom. For example, something is that none of us have anything in our control, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have anything in our control, be it anything in our lives or in other lives. We can't control anything. And accepting that I can't control anything is more freeing, right?
Yeah. True.
Liberating in a certain sense. So, whereas let's say if you could control everything, I think that would be more restricting to you rather than not having to control anything.
I think when people think that they control everything that is happening, it's like they are in charge, right? Like when they are in charge, they want everything to happen how they want it to happen. So usually when someone is in charge, they have a set of directions, where they want to go, and they want to go in that direction. And yeah, that gives a sense of stress too. When you think of something and then it doesn't goes how you want it to go.
Yeah. I mean, people are different, certainly. To imagine this, you can take two scenarios. One scenario would be to, let's say you were a project head where you had to, control what everyone was doing under you, give tasks, delegate tasks, and make them report to you, and control each and every aspect of the, project. Then as a head, you would find that really, some people thrive on this, but I think in general, it's a very stressful thing, and when you're trying to control, and then things don't go according to plan, and then, but whereas let's say you were working in that project and you had a set of rules, you had to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, and then you just follow them. I think that's
much more
experience,
easier, and it's much more liberating. Yeah.
I think it's freeing in a way. It's freedom because you don't have to think much. You just have to go out there and do things. And I think that's why people accept religion in a way, because let's say when you were born into this world and you were born in a particular religion, and that religion said, hey, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do this, do this, do this. It's easier for you to just accept that and then just move on in life.
I think rather than accepting, it's faith, right? So that nothing is in your control. So the part which you think is not in your control, you leave some spiritual entity responsible for that particular thing, and you have faith in that spiritual entity. So that gives you a sense of comfort that everything is gonna be all right, because you've given power to that entity. You have faith that some external power. Does this make sense?
Interesting. My brain doesn't work that way, but I can understand that argument for sure.
I go a lot back and forth between this free will and nothing is in my control. I my opinions on this topic change every single day, because this is what I feel. Okay, I've come to this conclusion, which will definitely might change. So the conclusion is that it's 50-50. Like there are few things that you can control, and there is a 50% of the aspect that you can't control. Like whatever you do is in your control, whatever happens to you is not in your control. So now when I'm talking to you, whatever I am talking to you is in my control. Whatever you say back, that is not in my control, which inevitably, yeah, sorry, too many English
Yeah.
words, yeah, so which inevitably affects the course of time that we are going to have on this podcast for the next, like, however long that we talk for.
Yeah, this thing is like explored in like almost every religion, and it's like something that like atheists used to like checkmate the believers. They say like, hey, like if you're free to do it, if free will exists, and like if God has everything planned out, how do you explain that? Checkmate.
Yeah.
It's a classic argument which atheists use, and there's also another thing which they use. Hey, if God loves everyone, why is there hell? Like these are the sort of things that atheists, classic atheist arguments. And this thing that you just said, free will, what's in my control, what's not. It's like explored in all religions. Like we speak about this in our last podcast, where in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "Karmanyavadikaraste ma paleshu kadachana." He says that like do whatever you have to do and like leave the consequences to the Almighty.
To the Almighty. Yeah.
In essence, he's telling like, just do your shit, dude. Like, rest, I'll take care. That's literally what he told Arjuna. Like,
Yeah.
bro, like you're a yeah. He actually said, bro. He said, bro, you're a Kshatriya. You're meant to fight, right? And there's this movie called Rama Ramare, and it's a beautiful Kannada movie. Directed by D. Satyaprakash, and Satyaprakash I hope I get his name right. I'm so sorry if it's wrong. Like it's a beautiful movie, and
what's the movie name? Could you just repeat the movie?
It's called Rama Ramare, and I've sent you the final song between Krishna.
Yeah.
So in that, like I think it's a more heart-wrenching rendition of that conversation where like Arjuna says like, hey, I'm feeling really scared. Like they're all my, they're my cousins, and I grew up with them. They're my teacher. They're my like grandparents, and like they're people who I looked up to when I was growing up. And like I feel really scared. Like it's not that like I don't want. It's just that it's really scary for me. And
he doesn't have the stomach to kill people of his own family.
Yeah, it's stomach and it's conflicting and all of that. And then Krishna says like a brother only. He says like when like in that song, it's so beautifully written. He says like Odagolage Bhayagtare, like I'm feeling scared. And then Krishna says back that like Nanidini Sumniraya, like I'm there. Like why are you worrying? And then like and he says I don't want to fight. And then Krishna says, how can you even forget your dharma? Like it's your job, it's your duty, right? You can't forget that. A gardener cannot come randomly one day and tell I won't cut plants, right? I mean, in a certain sense, like it's your duty right now and you have to fulfill it. The outcomes are never, they're never in your control again. So leave that to me. Leave that to me in a certain way is telling like, don't worry about it. I think
don't
if
worry
I had
about
to
the
apply,
output, yeah,
if I had to apply that to my life, like even if I don't believe in like Krishna being like an entity, like you just said, a spiritual entity. It's just something that like it's freeing for me to realize that hey, if I just do this, it's enough. I can't really control what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
So it's a very beautiful thing that's told in Bhagavad Gita that way. And like for people who get bogged down or like are not that interested in reading actual Sanskrit verses and like the translations or like just the like the raw material as such, if you watch things like this, and that's what is like really beautiful to me about storytelling, where like that entire thing is like told in such a heart wrenching and gut wrenching way, where it's so beautiful and like yeah, and you can just see that. And then other religions have explored the same thing of like if you have free will, and if you do have free will, like what's in your control. but yeah, it's interesting, and and like I said again in the last podcast, where like it's extremely hard and like borderly humanly impossible for a human to just do what he has to do and not expect anything in return or not worry about the outcome. It's impossible. In IMHO, in my honest opinion, I think those are like left for like ascetics who sit
I
in
think you can
Himalayas.
still try to, right? Like, see,
You can, I mean, you can tell yourself to not, but to practice it 100% is impossible.
this is what I believe. Okay, from this perspective, like, don't expect the output. Usually, people when they do something right, they're more fascinated about the output than the process. Let's say you like doing stand-up comedy, you do improv, and then you also direct plays, you write, right? So what if the whole and sole purpose of you writing that is because you like the response that you get from the audience? Like after the show is done, if you want everybody to stand up and like clap, if that is what you aspire, then that will also be reflected in the work that you do. Like if you like the part about writing the story and then directing the play, if you like that and not think about what you're gonna get from this, I think that's when the art form or whatever you do will be pure, right? So let's say if I'm working for money and that is the only reason that I'm working for, that means I'm definitely not happy. Like I'm just pushing one day at a time. I just cannot, because and I'm saying myself that I'm getting money in return, so I'm just pushing through. But if I like what I'm doing, let's say, uh yeah, like if someone pays you for doing stand-up comedy, and like what more do you want? Like, so it's like
Yeah,
when you do something for the sake of something else, then yeah, the process won't be pure. Like if you look at
interesting.
yeah.
It's interesting. Like, and like, I could argue that, like, if I write to solicit a certain response from the audience, who's to say that that isn't a pure intention in itself, right? So, okay, what do I mean by that? Like, let's say I'm an improv comedian, right? Hopefully, I don't know what I am, but let's say like we've had this discussion whenever we have performed the Bisibelebois, whenever we have done a show. It's like we've realized like some scenes we do, some improv scenes we do just to get that response from the audience. So like if we are performing in a PES university crowd, we know that what are the things that we can mention that can get us that
What
response.
works?
Yeah, what works? Like if I tell, hey, construction site, we know people are gonna lose their shit.
Yeah, because they can relate to that joke.
Yes, construction shit, smart comedians. Like, say they can relate to it. Oh, ID card. Where's your ID card? Oh, yeah. I mean,
Isn't
like,
that also the part of like doing improv? Like it's not something. See, in this aspect, like audience response is also a part of the art, right? Like it's also the part of like doing that.
I guess, but like, we've done this side of like, like you could call it commercial improv, where like the only goal is like entertain, right? But like as like we've progressed in our journeys and like we've done this for quite a while now, and we've not only done commercial, like, but we've also been and improvised with other improvisers from Bangalore and like other parts of the world, where they are so much more dedicated to the craft and like they're so much more focused on like the improvisation aspect as such, and like how can they work on their scenes and like basically not go for the lowest hanging fruit. And like you could call that like art, like what's that, like there's commercial cinema and then there's like art films,
Yeah.
so it's like that. So there's one side where like you can do something that's really entertaining and fun, and then there's another side which like is truly very artsy and you can stick to that and commit to that and do it. And we've done both sides, like we've seen both sides, and like where we guys are right now is right in the middle, because uh what I personally believe in is like, yeah, to be dedicated to the craft, to be as an artist, to truly be immersed in it, and like doing that is all fun. but like end of the day, like you have to, give people something to latch on to. So I think it's an equal, it's like the response,
I think
the
giving
response from,
what people want is also part of uh, being a comedian, right? I mean, like it's a fine balance
but like
between what.
just also just can't give what people want. Like it's because then like it doesn't stay exciting enough for you to continue, and that will affect you personally. So there's a song, there's an Kanye West, he released an album called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy after like a whole controversial saga with like Taylor Swift and stuff. This was back in 2010. So Kanye West released this album called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Like he went to Hawaii and like for 2 hours and like worked his ass off, and like he came out with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is the best, like arguably the best album of this century, maybe. I mean, like technically speaking, objectively speaking, it's so good. All the songs are so good. It's easy for people to enjoy too. It's melodic, it's grand, it's luscious, it's extravagant, it's maximalist, it's pure like art. Like if you go into a French museum and you see those paintings with like extravagant details, like Art Deco, it's magnificent, right? So to compare this album with a building is to like see those extravagant buildings, museums that you see in France, right? So this was his album. It was beautiful. It had luscious sounds and everything. And then next album after that is an album called Jesus, and in that it's all of that stripped down. It's like noise. It's noise. It's industrial. It's grimy. To compare this album with a building would be like a brutalist concrete building, just like a concrete building. That's all. No paint, nothing. But like it's still structurally intact. But like it's bare minimal bones.
It's not art.
Stripped. It's not. It is art. Arguably, for some people, concrete buildings are beautiful. Who do you know? What do you know? But like I love that album too. But like it's all of that stripped down and into this. So in this, it's like noisy. It's like it's harsh. It's acid rap, and like it's all things together. And like the first song is a song called On Site, and On Site, it's like there's a line in which the chorus goes, he'll give you what you need, but it may not be what you want, right? So it's him telling to his listeners that I'm going to give you music. It's what you need, but it's not what you want. Because people who just listened My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, they wanted that same sound, that beautiful melodic, instrumentals and stuff. But here it's totally different. So it's telling this might not be what you want, because you might expect the old Kanye, but this is what you actually need. And I think for an artist to stay relevant or to keep progressing through his art and to stay true to himself, you have to make bold calls like that and change your sound and do stuff like this. So coming back with this thing in line, I guess like why I started doing improv in the first place is because I was happy after watching improv shows. Like I laughed, right? So like if I saw some improv show, they did like, artful, amazing scene building, character building, was all that. But like I didn't laugh. Like I wouldn't, it wouldn't make that much sense for me. So how I got introduced into the world of improv was by like Danish Seth and Saad Khan and their Improv India, their group, where like the joke is Danish Seth putting on Nagaraj accent and be like, "Hey, rascal!" That's itself. Oh, crazy guy! Oh, lamao! Best joke of my life. So I think that experience where like people have lost their stuff, and like I think that's an essential aspect as well. But for me to also keep doing it, like I must feel like I am improving in my art, and like I'm getting better as an improviser.
Progress. Then there should be progress.
Internally, I should feel that like I'm improving. Like if I keep doing the same jokes again and again, like it gets boring. And I can make the same analogy with movies. So what got me into like my favorite genre of movies is fantasy. So, which is me in a nutshell. Like I'm like, I fantasize about fantasy. But like I'm obsessed with like fantasy movies, like fantasy worlds, and uh, which also ties with why I love mythology so much, Ramayana, Mahabharata, because they're all in a certain sense fantasy. They're all fantasy stories. They're like larger than life and all of that. Like Amar Chitra Katha.
Yeah.
Amar Chitra Katha used to like have a like they used to advertise their Ramayana and Mahabharata stories with like an ad which said Rama's wife was kidnapped. He got her back. If Ramayana was so simple, it wouldn't be an epic. So like that's how they used to think. 5 brothers fought with 100 brothers. The 5 brothers won. If Mahabharata was that simple, it wouldn't be an epic. So that's how they used to advertise it. And yeah, so like this was my introduction into this. But now as I've grown, and like what I'm saying is like my interests were birthed when like I saw stories like this. I read about Ramayana, Mahabharata. I saw these, and that's why like people are so such hardcore fans of uh, fantasy series like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings. That's why like they have Star Trek, Star Wars, right? They're such so attached to it, and like they're such hardcore fans of the format just because it's like a world to be lost in, right?
Yeah.
So now that's what I was into, and that was my place. But now even though now I watch art movies where like which are art movies like truly art made for like the craft of cinema. Some are like bizarre, absurd, some are cryptic, some are tough to understand, tough to digest, whatever. Now that I do watch and appreciate them, it took me a while to tune myself to those things and like appreciate the nuances in such cinema. But yeah, I think as much as this side of cinema is needed for me to tune my brain, this side is also as important for me to remember why I fell in love with this experience in the first place and why it gives me so much joy, right? Like even now, if I tune in, turn on Game of Thrones. By the way, the last season sucks. So even though, despite that, season 3, if I watch, the Red Wedding, and season 4, I watch Tyrion's trial, and like all those moments are like hardwired into my brain. Like I know where I cried. I know what season 2, episode 9, the Battle of Blackwater that ends, and like the Rains of Castamere, the song plays, and like oof, the goosebumps I had for the first time. It's still there with me, right? So I think all of this together like is what shapes a person, and like
True.
like,
It does.
yeah.
I think like growing up, I've heard a lot of stories too. Like on the previous podcast, I told like growing up, like my big grandparents told me a lot of stories, and I think that when it comes to storytelling, right, there are like two aspects. One, like what happened there, and the other thing is what are you taking from that story, and whatever you take is so subjective. So when you look at cinema, right, or when you look at stand-up comedy or any art for that matter, you take what you feel is relevant to you. Like when you said when you're watching Game of Thrones, you were connected to few screens because those those scenes spoke to you. Like you could associate something of that part to yourself. And I think that like that's the whole part. Like even when it comes to like Hinduism or mythology, all the stories, right, this is what I love about like all the mythological stories. It's that when it comes to Ramayana, there are different versions of Ramayana, and in like one version of Ramayana, Ravana might be the villain, and there is an entirely different stories, an entirely different perspective of Ramayana from Ravana's perspective. And this is what I think is true, because there is no one truth. Like there is no one single uh, one single truth and fact for everybody. It's very subjective. There's no universal truth. So I think that, like, when you're looking at Hinduism, or when you listen to all these stories, you build your own perspective towards the stories. Like when you say you like mythology stories, you have your own perspective on it. You have your own take on whether this is right or whether this is wrong, or whether like the way how they treated this person is right or wrong. You have your own perception, and this perception makes your character, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's to, like, rephrase what you just told. What did you tell about the two things that matter in stories?
Hmm.
What is told and what you take?
Yeah.
I think uh, uh, my way to rephrase that would be like, what matters is what is the story and who is telling it is what matters. So if I was a child, and like, if when my granddad was telling me the story of Mahabharata, in his head, like in or when my dad was telling me stories of Mahabharata, in his version, if his favorite character was Arjuna, my favorite character would be Arjuna too, right? Because he would get excited when, like, he talks about Arjuna and, like, glorify him and all of that. But like, when my dad's favorite character in Mahabharata is Karna, and that's why Karna is my favorite character too. And like, objectively you can argue or whatever, but like, that's enough for me. That's why he's my favorite character. And like, for when if you observe in Marvel fans, where some people like Iron Man and some people like Captain America. Like, if the first Marvel movie you watched was Iron Man, chances are you like Iron Man. If the first movie you saw was Captain America, chances are you like Captain America more, right? And if you're a black person, then like, you will obviously like Black Panther,
Context.
right?
Yeah.
Context, and it's like, who told the story matters just as much as what story is being told. So, like you said, there are multiple versions of Ramayana. So there's a version of Ramayana where Ravana is the hero.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's where, like, in the end, it's almost as if he, like, the author in that, calls Ravana's, why he kidnapped Sita was because of a lapse of judgment, and like, it just happened, and like, it was like that one small chink in his armor which he couldn't control. So it happened, and in the end he defeats Rama and Lakshmana, and like, he ties them both, and they come and they surrender to him. And then Ravana, somewhat like out of being a better person, he like returns Sita and stuff like this. There's that version. So like, let's say you were told that as a child rather than the traditional Ramayana versions that you say. Chances are Ravana is going to be your hero, not Rama or Lakshmana, right? So what story is told matters just as much as who is telling it. So that's why, like, we associate our grandparents or our parents or our teachers telling us stories just as much as the stories themselves, right? So like, when we spoke about Krishna Sudama story last time, you immediately went, hey, my grandmother used to tell me that, right? So just as important as what you took from Krishna Sudama's relationship was the very fact that your grandmother was telling it. It's sort of like ingrained in your head. The same thing happens with, like, our human relationships. Let's say you had a romantic relationship with your significant other, and like, both of you shared a song, right? Like, it was a song that you used to listen to in the car or whatever, right? Just as much as the song, like, you could argue like the song is good or the song is bad or whatever, just as much as the song, the memories associated with that song matters just as much.
Yeah.
That's why you hear people telling, like, hey, like, my ex ruined that song for me. Like, I can't listen to that song anymore because it puts me in a bad headspace again. And like, people associate certain objects or like certain things with those memories and with people. And I think it's beautiful that way. And like, hey, they ruined that song for me. Like, give me that song back. Like, they ruined that song for me. And, or maybe like, if it's a good thing, and like, let's say you and your granddad used to like a song a lot, and now your granddad's not there anymore, and that certain song plays again, it takes you back to that warm place of love and affection. And it doesn't matter that, like, if the song was actually good or not. It doesn't matter. Like, let's say you and your uh, friend really liked this movie together, and that movie is a trash movie, IMDb 3.8 rating. But like both of you liked it, like maybe for the wrong reasons. Like you're like, hey, what a shitty movie this is, and like you watched and like you laughed and like you have memories associated with. It doesn't fucking matter if it's IMDb 3.8 anymore, because you have all those memories associated with that, right? So it doesn't matter if
it doesn't,
The Hangover is not comedic gold, or like it's cheap comedy or whatever. If you had a good experience with your friends watching that, that's all that matters now, right?
Yeah.
So, and
it does matter a lot.
Yeah, and like to connect these things back to like the free will and like are we in control of what? That argument, to bring this full circle, is that like me telling why it's humanly impossible for us to just focus on this thing, because as humans all of these things matter to us, like other people laughing, other people crying. So it matters. And like just as much as me staying true to the craft, what matters is like people, the sense of community, and like, is it bringing people closer together? This aspect of it matters just as much. So which is why it's humanly impossible, because that's what makes us human in the first place.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, because even when you do a charitable act, right, you're expecting the other person to feel good. Like even when you do something, there is also a part of expectations. I think it is like close to impossible to do something by not expecting anything. It's close to impossible. But yeah, I think what you're expecting, the nature of your expectations, like I think that's what matters. Like, are you expecting the other person to be like happy, or are you expecting the other person to feel bad? I think the nature of expectation matters, like when you look at from the perspective that you say.
Yeah, definitely. And like, it's not wrong to have expectations. It's just that sometimes it's nice to tell yourself that like it doesn't matter, the outcome doesn't matter. Right. Sometimes it's I think it's nice to tell yourself to embrace the joy in doing the act itself. So like when you're going to buy a gift for your friend, it's sometimes nicer to tell yourself that like, hey, me spending time thinking about this person and what they like and doing this nice thing for them, getting this gift, packing it, writing a letter, and like sending this, doing this is making me happy, rather than them finding it and be like, oh my god, this is the best gift ever. That doesn't matter. What matters right now is like you finding joy in doing. And like I think it's a nice thing to do, right? Otherwise, like I think it's also motivational in a way. Like if you were a cricketer and obviously you should like have a goal, which is like, hey, I'll score a century, or like I have to win this particular tournament or whatever. But like to stick through those practice sessions is to tell yourself that I love cricket, I like practicing, I love the game, and to just stick to it and like and like
to endure the pain of the process, you need to love the process.
Yeah, I think it's nice. Like when you obviously started working out, you obviously had a target weight and like target body fat percentage or whatever, all that stuff. But like end of the day, what mattered was like you enjoying working out every day.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, go to the gym and pump, 80 kgs of bench press. How much, Sanko? How much do you bench?
My max for now is, I think it's like 70. I did like 2 or 3, but yeah, like I've.
So what matters is like fucking going 70 kilos. Doesn't matter if like I have, John Cena chest or whatever.
In order to reach there, like there is, I mean, like in order to do like a 70 kg bench press or like a 60, 70 kg squat, in order to do that, you have to go through a lot of horrible uh, gym time, like where you don't like there is pain, you have to endure that pain. If you don't like that pain and if you're not having fun with it, then I don't think you're gonna reach that goal. So yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all like full circle. Like coming back to improv, where like for me to enjoy improv, obviously like I would like want X number of people to show up to the show and to get Y number of laughs and like for Z number of applauses. Obviously, it would be nice to get a standing ovation. I mean, like I wouldn't be like, hey, better. I would be like, hey guys,
Stop
no,
it,
no, if
guys,
I
please.
stop it. Standing ovation, like I just like improv and like I did improv because I like doing improv. Standing ovation and all, not necessarily. Like, no one would do that, right? Of course, it matters, but like for me to be committed to the practice sessions and all of that, I think falling in love with the act
Yeah,
of doing things itself
I think
matters.
you're making people
And
laugh, right? Like I think you are making people laugh. Even if you're expecting something, that expectation is making your audience happy, which is a good expectation to have. Like it's a part of like improv or comedy. It's a part of making people laugh, which in turn makes them happy. So here, like
thing is,
whatever expectation you have, it's a positive and good expectation. Nature of expectation, as we spoke earlier.
yeah, I think like, just like you setting a target goal for yourself with your workouts. I think it's the same thing here, right? It's when like people make movies where like maybe Quentin Tarantino goes like, hey, by the end of this movie, I want people to be excited. Like, whoa,
I want
I
people to
want
go
them to,
kill.
yeah, I want him to be energetic. Or like if Christopher Nolan goes, by the end of this, I want them to think, like if they maybe that's the expectation and then they went into the process, maybe, yeah.
Have you heard
But
an
I get,
interview? In an interview, Christopher Nolan, like an interviewee asked Christopher Nolan, uh, some people like it's complicated for audience to understand whatever you make. So what do you think about that? He says, "Fuck them." Like he doesn't care about like what audience feel. Like I think that's
but would you
partially the
say
reason
yes?
why he is Christopher Nolan.
No, but he does. It's not like he doesn't, right?
Yeah,
If he really
indirectly he
didn't, he
does.
wouldn't
Yeah.
release it. If he really didn't care, he wouldn't release it. You just take one nice CD, burn one CD in studio, go to his home and keep it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
yeah,
like,
it's a part of filmmaking process is to show it to the audience. Yeah.
and like exactly what makes us human. So I instead of like arguing that you should just focus on doing the task and not worrying about the outcome, I think like telling people that it's right only if you focus and have no expectations. I think it's more you know freeing, and like a nicer way to phrase it is like expecting is human. Like it, as human
Yeah.
beings we are bound to this, and that's what makes us us, right? We're not like wild animals where like they just go on live about their life and not worry about
One day at a time.
consequences. Or
Yeah.
yeah, like what makes us human is, and what brings us together is the very fact that we expect, and like we want things, we want people to do nice things to us.
Mm.
Like if I am going to get married to a
Yeah.
person, like I expect them to do nice things for me, right? Like sumne, yeah, marriage we
No,
did
but
off,
see. Like I think expectation is an innate nature of human being, but I think that expectation also brings sorrow, right? Like the nature of your expectation. When you expect someone else to make you happy, then I think you are
yeah,
bound to be sad because your
yeah,
happiness is depending on someone else making you happy. Yeah,
yeah.
like I
And
think you
that's
can escape those sorrows, right, by not expecting.
no, but like that's the core fundamental principle of Buddhism, which is ase dukkha ke karana. Like desire is the number one source of misery. To expect is to feel sad,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
right?
oh yeah. This takes me back to the time like in the initial lockdown phase. In the past 1 year, like so much of my ideology has changed. Initially, even I had this very, or like when I was reading Gita, this might sound very dramatic, but when I was reading it, like of all the things going around in the world, and then I was at a very different like place when I was reading it. And then when I read this like desire, like don't have desire, for a couple of days I just snapped like something, a kind of a mini like short-term revelation where like for a couple of days it was very different for me. Like I was looking at my parents very differently. And then like there was a moment when I just snapped back, when I realized that you not having a desire is also a desire, like a desire to not have a desire. Like there is no way that you can escape desire. Like when this thought hit, I was like, yeah, like nothing makes sense at all. Like that is my conclusion when I look at uh, like me and my dad. Like when I started this podcast, I told like there were two instances where I thought of you, right? This is the second instance. So in our family we have a lot of spiritual like discussions, like debates. Like my dad has, we all are very strongly opinionated people, and when we start talking it's like we are like standing on our grounds. And when we start eating, it's like the plate is like almost dried, but we're still like talking about it. So my dad has his own like opinion. He is very much like very well educated. He read a lot of stuff and he has a lot of knowledge. And I have my own like perspective, like nuanced perspective, and my sister has her own perspective, which like we it's like we discuss all the different perspectives, like too many. It's like it's almost like we are arguing and fighting over spirituality. But yeah, it's so then I also like thought about you like when we were
Yeah,
discussing about the stories.
yeah, a similar thing. What happens in my house is like my dad has his opinion, I have an opinion, and like we talk, we talk, ends with mom being like, please,
Calm down,
please eat
please.
one more chapati. Yeah, yeah. Like just because you're talking so angrily, like don't show it on your hunger. Like please eat one more chapati. That's how it ends. So it's like then we'll be talking, my dad will be eating. Sakuta, enough, I'm done.
It's like this is what you said about Mahabharata. This didn't happen. Like wait, I'm not gonna eat my meal now.
Yeah, that and like political and all that stuff, right? Then my mom will be like, "Hey, don't show it on your on like
Food.
hotte mel chorus comedy." Like, yeah, like please, will you eat at least half chapati? My dad, no, I can't go. But like, yeah, it's a fun thing, and
Yeah, I love
uh,
the fact that like your family, like you guys do that. I love the fact that we do that, because when I'm arguing, I am like I want to win that. Like I want to put my point so much that I don't listen to what my dad says sometimes. So when the conversation ends and I start thinking like whatever my dad told, and it makes sense, I was like, oh yeah, like whatever my dad told from his perspective, it's absolutely right. And
I
he
mean, like obviously making it sound so dramatic. It's not as dramatic as that. I mean, but yeah, I think like as like these discussions keep happening, we change and like our relationships change and like we learn to be more accepting and like our thoughts and like our opinions mingle and like we birth new opinions altogether.
I mean, we are
But
like discussing and fighting over something educational, right? Like there is some takeaway from this. It's not like we're discussing about, oh, like we're not bitching about someone else's family. Oh, they did that, this, that. At least we're having something like worthwhile discussion. Like I think that's where the nature of upbringing like comes into picture. So this like taking back to context, like however I am brought up, like whatever stories, whatever discussions I have had, like I have context, and this context helps me gain different perspective over different things. My dad is like a like huge fan of Rama. Like he's he loves Rama a lot. Like even the whole like Ramayana. Like when he starts like talking about uh like how what Rama had to go through, like all the pain and suffering, he almost has like tears in his eyes. Like he's so empathetic towards that character and then that God. And so that influences me too, like adding to what you said earlier.
yeah, and like for me, uh, yeah, and like for me, like going back to how it matters, like what who tells you the story, like how much it matters in like your own head, is like why I love Karna so much is because like my dad also like one of his principles that he has given to me is to like like if you see a beggar on the street or like if you see someone who's needy and you feel like giving something, if you get that thought where like hey I should help him, then like don't hesitate, just help. Like, don't think about it. Don't think if that beggar is like fake, or like if he's running some racket, something, or like if the child is actually his. Don't think about that. Like, if you felt like giving in that one split second, just do it off, and don't think about it ever again. Right? And this comes back, and I think that's why Karna is his favorite character as well, where I think Karna, looking at Karna's stories, like reading Karna's stories and listening to them is like, and also the first play I went alone to Rangashankara was a play called Karna Rasayana, which was like excerpts from Pampa, Ranna, Kumaravyasa, all of their things taken and Karna's story told in that way. So like, that's why Karna is my favorite character. But in that, like, when my dad and Amar Chitrakatha as well, like a lot of memories with that. So like, Karna exposed me to a lot of things that like, hey, like, even if you're, I think it's a very
touchy story.
It's touching, and like it's like, what do you say? It's a harsh story for like a young person. Like when I was just like 9, 10, 11 years old, if you come and tell me that being good all the time does not mean you're gonna win, I think it's hard for me to swallow that, because then Karna was good throughout, and like he was good, and still he died, and that too he was killed in an unjust manner. Like how is this fair, right?
Because he was on the side of bad force.
That's your argument, but for me, I don't care. Like, why did Karna had to go through? Why did he have to go through that? And like, it's so unfair in his whole life. Like, first he's birthed out of Kunti, and Kunti just abandons him, and that's the first thing where like she's just discarded, and then he's raised by a charioteer, and like then he goes and like then like all his life he struggles to get education because he knows he's talented. So, but no one gives him the proper training because he's not of the right caste. And like this like, also, exposed me to caste injustice in like how, I mean, like it made me think about that. So like no one trains him because he's of low caste. And finally he goes to Parashurama, and Parashurama, in the guise of a Brahmin, Parashurama hates Kshatriyas, like hates them, like he circled the earth 13 times to wipe Kshatriyas off the face of the planet. So and Parashurama's only policy is that he's going to give training to Brahmins. So then Karna goes to Parashurama as a Brahmin, like he fakes his identity and he goes there, and like Parashurama trains him, and like he's an amazing archer, whatever, like he's the best warrior out there. And then one day, like Parashurama comes, and like on one tired afternoon, Parashurama comes and sleeps on his lap, right? And then a beetle, an insect, comes and like stings his knee, right? And that insect is eating Karna's knee, like it's eating it up, right? And like his legs are bleeding, and they're bleeding, and then but he doesn't move an inch. Because if
he's sleeping on his lap.
He's got like my master, my teacher, who I really love, the teacher who taught me everything and I really love, he's going to wake up and I don't want to disturb his sleep. So he doesn't move an inch. And then Parashurama wakes up and he sees his thigh and it's bleeding, and he's like, and Parashurama is shocked, like, how could you sustain such an injury? Like, how could you like go through so much pain? It's not possible for a Brahmin to go through this. You have to be a Kshatriya because because they eat non-veg and whatnot. So it's impossible for you. You have to be a Kshatriya. And then Karna tells he tells the truth about himself that I am a Kshatriya and I'm not a Brahmin. And for being so loyal and for loving your teacher so much, he gets a curse in return. So Parashurama curses him that at a time when you will really need all of my knowledge, you will forget it. So you will forget all that I've taught you at a time when you desperately need it. So that's the curse that he gives him. So I'm like, how can the world be so unfair where you were so loyal to your teacher and you loved him so much and still you get a curse? Like, what sort of fucked up world is this? And then he goes to Pandavas and Pandavas, and Parashurama is an avatar of Vishnu. Like, if God, like Vishnu is God, and like if God can be like that, like who am I even worshipping, right? So then he goes to Pandavas. Pandavas were supposed to be the heroes of this story, right? Who are like, who themselves are going through a lot of injustice. These guys treat Karna like shit again. Like they call him low caste, they call him Sutaputra, and like what's happening? And of all the people, Duryodhana, who you really want to hate, he's the one who shows compassion, and they become close friends, and they become the best of friends, the best friendship like ever, right? So like then like, are they really heroes if they treat me like this? And like that happens. So this is the second injustice, and then he goes to Draupadi's Swayamvara, and like Draupadi just looks at him and she says, "Chi, like who is this guy?" Right, and like
He drops the bow and then he just leaves. Like he doesn't even attempt to.
doesn't even do that. Like how can a person be so hateful just because they're from a lower caste? Like what? And they, like, and then after that, like the war happens, and then Krishna, right before the war happens, he comes over and like he reveals to Karna that that you are not low caste, and like you were born of you are actually Kunti's son. Imagine
You're brother of Pandavas.
Yeah, you're the eldest son, and in fact, you're Yudhishthira's brother. So if Pandavas win this, you will be the rightful heir to the throne. Like you will become king, right? So that's the thing that Krishna says. Like he comes in, like this was like right before the war, and like Krishna has like master plan, right? Is that I will go and reveal this to him, basically to mess with his head, to mess with Karna's head, and like there are two things that can happen, right? If Krishna goes and reveals that Karna is Kunti's son. One thing is that Karna can be, can be like, hey, Kunti is my mother, and he can come and fight for the Pandavas, so that's a win. If not, Karna is a good person, so he will get mentally affected by getting to know this news. So then again, it's a profit for them, right? So
like either which ways they wanna fuck with like Karna's like mental space.
Yeah.
So either like he'll come on this side, so they will win the war either which ways. The outcome of the strategy.
It's strategy, and like he goes and he says, I remember Kumara Vyasa's verse where he says like Lalane padedangaidal makkal like neen modalige hutte, and like he says like out of the all children, you were Kunti's first son. And then to just imagine how Karna would have felt, right? All his life he has been, deprived of good education, deprived of,
respect,
marriage, because people were looking down upon him, deprived of respect, all because of his low caste. And then he realizes he wasn't low caste at all, and he was high caste, like he's of upper status. Like to get that, it's like how fucked up should your fate be for things to be like that? And despite that, like he doesn't, he's not like shit, I regret my life. Karna's still like the sort of person, like if you give him an option to go back in time and like, would you change your life if you knew that you were of upper caste? Then like Karna would say, no, my life, despite whatever, I don't want to change it. And I'm so happy that I got to meet Duryodhana, and like we're such good friends and all of that. That's how loyal he is, right? And he says that. And then like after much debate and all of that, Karna agrees that I will not harm the Pandavas except Arjuna. So Krishna got what he wanted. Basically, Pandavas are going to be unhurt from Karna, right? So he got what he wanted. And then Indra, to protect Arjuna, he comes disguised as a Brahmin. And like Karna, when he was born, his special gift was he was born with Kavacha Kundala, which is like an armor and earrings, which is like protects him from everything. So Indra comes as a Brahmin and he asks him, can you give your, what do you want? Basically, Karna says, I'll give you anything that you want. So he says,
because he's a Brahmin, right? Like he respects, and when Brahmin comes for begging for something, then like out of respect you give whatever they ask.
Yeah, I think it's like general policy in like Kshatriyas who to like donate and stuff. And Karna is like very
respectable.
Karna, yeah, Karune comes from Karna, right?
Karune means
The word
sympathy.
Karna means kindness, sympathy, and all of that. Danavira Shurakarna, that's what they say, right? Like he was ready to give anything away. He was a warrior. He was magnificent. All of that, and he just gives it away. And then Indra is like, "What the hell? Like he actually just gave it to me? Like what? Like, dude, how can you do this? Like
This
he's
could
shocked
protect
that
your
like
life. This armor could
yeah,
protect your life, and you just gave it away, like without even
he
thinking for a split second.
yeah, he,
Indra was so taken aback from the kindness or the way how Karna just gave this away. Indra gave this lightning thunder
yeah.
to Karna, and Karna uses this to kill Gatotkacha, right?
Yeah, that happens, and like he saves it for Arjuna, but like he has to use it, and then finally his chariot gets, and then like
His chariot gets stuck in what, like mud, somewhere,
in
right?
mud. Yeah, and I remember the Amar Chitrakatha cover, which is like him trying to remove his wheels from the mud, right? It's him. It's like him trying to move it away, but it's stuck in the mud, and that's because his charioteer abandons him. And there's a story behind that as well, which is but like his chariot gets stuck in the mud, and then Krishna and like they come and they murder him. Like he's without weapons, stuck in the middle of nowhere with his charioteer stuck. Like what an unheroic death for such a hero, for a person, for such a warrior to be killed in such a fashion. Like what, like all of these things, it made me feel so like it messed with me.
With your head,
It didn't mess with me, but I wouldn't say it like messed, but like it was just like
it created strong opinions in your head. Like it created strong thoughts about certain topics.
yeah, and like it revealed a lot of things to me, and to see such a sad story, or like to see such injustice in an epic which is all about justice and like good winning over bad, and like all of those things in a story like that, because till then all stories which I read were like, hey, good versus evil loses, good wins, and that's the end, happy ever after. And to see even like Mahabharata is such a story where like at least in its when I heard it initially, where like Pandavas are good, Kauravas are bad, Pandavas beat the Kauravas and they win. But to in this story to see something that was, the wrongdoings of the Pandavas and to see injustice, like I think that like shaped my perspective towards all other stories as well. Yeah. And like that's why,
which was a very strong and
like,
valid, unique perspective. This perspective is unique to you, right?
Good and bad. Yeah. That's why I see like good and bad in like everything now. Like last time when we spoke about Vali Vade, I argued how like Sugriva had an evil side to him as well, and like how Vali had a good side to him, or everything, right? How Rama had a good side, how Rama had an evil side. Like I told that last time, how much ever of a dutiful son Rama was, he was wrong, like he was a bad husband. Like that's an argument that I made, and like you might.
But also, right, like about this, like me and my dad, we recently had this conversation about this, like this exact topic about like Rama's questionable part as a husband to Sita. So my dad like so confidently said he gave few instances from like a different perspective of Ramayana. There is like different perspectives. There is one perspective of Ramayana where Shiva says Ramayana to Parvati. So this is Shiva's perspective of Ramayana. So in like different perspectives, if you want to know why that happened, there is an actual reason to why Rama did that. Like
there is a reason.
Yeah. So this is not like I mean like when you pursue this, when you want to, if you're curious about why this happened to any spiritual act in any of Indian mythology, there is like in different stories or different Vedas, there is a reasoning to why that happened and why it happened that way. So yeah, I think we should.
Yeah. what I'm telling is like there might be a reason, but at the end of the day, it doesn't take away the fact that he wronged Sita, or like Sita felt bad when these things happened, right?
Like, what
That's just my thing.
exactly
But
do you think like that went wrong, and which like that Rama did wrong as a husband? Is it the Agni Pariksha thing where he uh, he asked Sita to jump in the fire? Is that what?
no, I'll tell you this. No. It's not as like straightforward as that. But like no, like the thing is, okay. To answer this, and I'll tell this story later.
Okay.
Uh, to answer this is this thing. What I feel is like, yeah, Rama had his reasons, whatever. Like, okay, do you feel Dasharatha should have sent Rama away? Like, Rama was his favorite son. Do you think?
No, see, okay. So to this part, right? Like when Dasharatha gave his
No,
word to his wife that like he'll take any boon. So Dasharatha didn't want Rama to go to exile. Like it was Rama took that decision to maintain, to keep the word that his father gave to his wife. So out of respect for that
yeah,
word,
fair
Rama
enough. But
went.
like,
Yeah.
should no, but like Dasharatha didn't had a choice to not tell it at all, right? But he could have denied Kaikeyi completely.
Yeah, but he gave a
But like
word.
he
No.
chose. Yeah, he did. I'm telling you that. Like I'm telling that like this. Yeah, like Dasharatha had his reasons for doing that. Like he had given his word. That's the reason. But it still doesn't beat the fact that Rama was unjustly sent away into exile.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
such a
Okay.
right.
If you are like.
Similarly, like
Hmm.
Rama had his reasons for like for treating Sita the way that he did, but like should he have? I don't know. I mean, it's a moral dilemma, and like it's something to ponder over. So the story, what I is not just Agni Pariksha. What I am, what I'm not saying Rama is a bad person or anything. I'm just saying there's this side to him as well, where like he sends Sita away to Valmiki's ashram, and that's where she gives birth to Lava and
Lava
Kusha,
Kusha,
right?
yeah.
Right? Okay. Let me just put this in context, right? Why does Rama send Sita away? Because people are talking bad, like Sita was away from Rama for 12 years, like 13 years, and like what we don't know anything about her. So like Rama can't handle the gossip. So he says like for the better of both of us and like for me to have respect as a king, I think you should go away from her now. I
No,
think
I
you need
don't
to
think.
take a break or
See.
whatever. So
Rama is
so
a very
wait.
idealistic person, like according to my father. And if I talk to him about this, he definitely will tell like what actually happened. Like not every version of Ramayana is
No. Yeah,
like the right or ideal.
yeah. No. I'm just telling like I'm telling you why I think like this
Okay,
because
okay.
it's my cynical it's like maybe my cynical side which tries to see the wrong in good as well, right? I think how Karna's story impacted me was in this way, where like even in an ideal world, an ideal person can have like bad qualities, and even the worst character can have good qualities, right? And
Yeah,
like,
true.
okay, Rama had his reasons, he's ideal, and in fact, one of his other names is Purushottama, which is basically means Uttama Purusha, like the perfect man, right? So that's another name for Vishnu as well. So, despite that, like he sends pregnant Sita away, right? So, is that something that he had his reasons? Not saying he didn't. He sent Sita away. Okay. So, is it right for a husband to send his pregnant wife away? Like, shouldn't he take care of her? And like, she goes all alone, and like, there's a poem which I read, which goes like, "Halubidal kalmaram karaguvante," right? Which I forget. I think it's by Lakshmisha from Jaimini Bharata. I'm not sure. Don't take my word on this, but in that, like, Halubidal kalmaram karaguvante basically means that Sita cried in so much pain and like she moaned in so much pain that it caused trees and rocks to melt. Like Kalmaram Karaguvante, like trees and rocks melted because of Sita's agony. So you can imagine Sita, like she's all alone in the forest, like she's trying to find something to eat. She's pregnant, and she's pregnant with twins, and like she's not getting anything to eat. And like she just, in that poem, like he like heart-wrenchingly, describes how much pain she is in. Like he says like she talks with plants and like animals and like questions why, like why did she have to go through this? She was separated from her husband for the past 12 years, and the same thing's happening again. Like why does a woman, like what went wrong? Like why does she have to go through so much? Like what did she do to deserve this? Like is her past lives karma so bad that like she's suffering like this now? Like what's the reason, right? And like imagine that, like a pregnant woman not having the love and care of your husband and like suffering so much, right? And that's what Sita faces. And then like she finally goes in and finds Valmiki's ashram, where like he takes her under his care, and like then Lava and Kusha are born. Now Lava Kusha don't meet Rama until they're teenagers. So what Rama does is he does something known as Ashwamedha Yaga, and in Ashwamedha Yaga, what they do is they take a white ideal horse, like it's a beautiful stallion, and then they just unleash the horse. And like wherever the horse goes to, like to whichever kingdom, they stop and they ask the king over there. So they say like you should either like, come under the king now, or else be ready for war. That's what Ashwamedha Yaga is, right? So they send, and like, so behind the Ashwamedha or the Ashwa is like, so like Rama's army is coming, and that has like Lakshmana and, Hanuman and Bharata, Shatrughna, all of them, and like basically Rama's army, right? So they go, and then they stumble upon that. So they go to various kingdoms and they fight, they win wars. Some kings fight and they lose, and other kings, they agree that, hey, no one's ever going to go against Rama, and like they make truce, right? But then finally the horse comes to Valmiki's ashram, and there they see Lavakusha, and Lavakusha say, no, we're ready to fight, right? They're not like, oh, we're not going to strike truce or whatever. And those two idiots, they beat Rama's army entirely. Like,
did they know that Rama is their father?
No, they didn't know Rama was his father. They don't know who they're fighting against. So like in such a thing, those two idiots, they defeat Hanuman, they defeat everyone. And then news goes to Rama that like, oh, like his army calls like, yo, so like 2 kids are beating our ass, please come. Right? And like these things where like father meets a son or a child who he had no awareness about. Like it happens Babruwahana as well. Like Arjuna didn't know that Babruwahana was his son. And like similar thing over here where they come and like Rama meets them, and then like he realizes that Lavakusha are like Sita's son, and then they're his sons. So a big happy reunion happens and they go back. Right? I'm like breaking a lot of things down, but this is what the story is. So my question to you is, which sort of good father is not with their children for like the first 12, 13 years of their life? Like, is it right for a father to do that? Like, to not be with his children? Like, what sort of father does that? Like, so is Rama still ideal? He's a bad father. Like, he abandoned his sons. Like, imagine Lava and Kusha if their friends asked him, who's your father? And they told, we don't know. Right? What sort of father puts their children through something like that? Right? So, all these things factor into the opinion. Like, still, like, I find a lot of admirable qualities in Rama, and like I still love him, and like whatever, he's an ideal hero. But I'm just saying that like nothing is black or white ever, and that's what like the story of Karna taught me, and that's how I will approach life and like all stories in general. It's to like see the bad in good, and it's to like be aware of the bad in the good and to appreciate the good in the bad.
To me,
right?
This is spirituality, right? Like to me, this is see, I have never, like every time I listen to story, like so far, like even in the previous podcast, there were few stories or few versions. Like I disagree with you on few terms, but I but I'm okay with disagreeing with you, but I'm not against it, because that is not the point of all these stories. The point of all these stories is what opinion have you created, what lessons have you learned from that, which you're going to apply it in your life. Like so far, you told me that the Karna story, like all the wrongs that has happened to Karna, like so many people abandoned him, like all the bad things that happen, and also like everybody idolizes Rama, and there were few aspects of Rama's story that you felt weren't right. So even looking at all these negative things, you have your own perspective and lessons you learned, which you're going to apply it on your life, right? So yeah, I think this is what the entire Hinduism is about. Like, what's the point of having so many versions of one story? What's the point of, in few versions the gods are wrong, in few versions the Rakshasas, the evil entity, is wrong. But it's like you have two contradicting stories. But if the whole point of Hinduism was to give clarity, then they wouldn't have so many stories. The point of knowing all these stories is to create your own opinion. Like this is what, every time I argue with my dad, like this is what I tell him. Like he has his own opinion, he has his strong opinion, and I say that you have to give freedom, you have to learn, get your own perspective, and you have to have your own unique perspective of that story. You will definitely have a unique perspective on the story. When you told me Karna's story, right, uh, it gave me goosebumps actually. Like I think, like even when you were telling, you were kind of getting emotional, like when you were telling that story, because like you could empathize with like whatever happened to him, and also looking at whatever happened in your life, whomever you have met in your life, you pick up stories from them, and then you relate it with Karna's story. It's very like there is no way that me and you are going to have the same perspective on a story, because my upbringing entirely different, your upbringing but like two different contexts. So yeah, like two different inevitably there needs to be like different perspectives, like there's no way around it.
Yeah, to have your own perspectives. That's why stories are so important, and that's why uh, people tell stories to kids in the first place, so that they can form their own opinions and, like, all of that stuff. I think it's beautiful, and like you told, you might not agree with me, or like you might not agree of my judgment of Rama's character. Your dad might not, and like some other person I might come across who doesn't like Rama at all, right? Like for a woman might not like Rama at all because of how he treated, Sita. It's all these things are possible, and like it's fair. It's no opinion about this is wrong. What you learn is what you learn, right? And yeah, I think and this is like Karna's story probably is like what makes me like stories which are not just one-sided. It makes me see things not just as black and white, but as shades of gray. So that's why like my favorite fantasy stories are like Game of Thrones. Like in Game of Thrones, there is no good, there is no bad. Like the good characters can die anytime, the bad characters win. It's morally conflicting. Good characters take questionable decisions. All of that, like it's so fluid. Like things change at any time, and that's why I like that a lot. I like the Witcher series, which is also like about a Witcher who is like a
Henry
monster
Cavill.
hunter. Yeah, that one. But like, there's a Polish novel series by
Okay,
Andrzej
okay.
Sapkowski, and there is a video game as well, which is what has influenced me. So yeah, and like if you look at mythology from like other lands, so like if you look at Greek mythology of like the story of Kronos and Zeus and everyone, like even there, like they're so morally conflicting. Like Zeus is the god of lightning, or like he's the god, right? But like he had to murder his own father to become the god. Like there were like two factions called Titans and gods back then, and like Zeus, there was a war between the Titans and the gods, and like Zeus had to marry his own, murder, not marry, I'm so sorry, murder his own father to become a god. And like, uh, Kronos is Zeus's father, and Kronos had to murder his own father to become the king or whatever. And like, he used to eat all of his sons and children as soon as they were born, so that like he could keep his throne or whatever, right? So like these morally conflicting stories excite me so much, and like the whole God of War, the whole God of War game series where like you kill gods, it's fun, right? And like to see this, moral side, like this morally conflicting side, where like a father would kill his own son just to keep his throne, or like stuff like that. It's like it's interesting, and like it shows sides of the human mind and how we humans are, and like it's nice to explore.
We are a very multi-dimensional
Like,
species. Like we, like even our thoughts, it's not two-dimensional. It's not one-dimensional. It's always 3 to 4 dimensions. There are different layers to a thought. There are different intentions. Like there's different. Your intentions might be different. The actions might be different, and
exactly.
it's like too much.
You might know that some things are wrong, but you still end up doing a lot of those things, right? Right?
Yeah.
We do shit like that. That's why we're human. But yeah, why do people cheat in relationships? All of that stuff, right? We know morally things, but like things happen. So yeah, this is like my whole. That's why like I'm so blown away by storytelling. That's why I like writing, and the whole thing, like exploring the nuances and like reading in between the lines, like what did the author think about when he was writing this or whatever. Yeah, that's this whole thing. But yeah, good talk.
Yeah, I mean, this is what makes us humans, like we've been saying for a really long time. I'm sure like all the things, that all your perspectives about the stories affected your life. For sure it has affected my life. So now let's say like in a Ramayana, in the whole like Sugriva and Rama story, like in my perspective, like Rama, on the previous podcast we spoke about the Sugriva and the Rama, that story, right? Where Rama supports Sugriva because he's right, and like Vali, like he helps Sugriva defeat Vali because Sugriva is right. This is what I heard growing up. And even though Vali was strong and could bring Ravana down easily, he still took the side of Sugriva. This is the version that I heard growing up. So there were times in my life where I chose good over power. There were times where I chose a loyal friendship over something that I wanted very badly. So now like Rama wanted to get Sita back, and Vali could easily bring Ravana down. He was that strong, but he still supported Sugriva because Sugriva was right, and he supported the righteousness. So this thing, regardless of if it is right version or wrong version, this helped me make so many decisions in my life which I am proud of. Like which, even though I knew I was tempted the other way, I took the decision which I felt was right because of this story. So it has been like so many things have been ingrained in my brain. And yeah, I think that's the whole point of like everything. Like we all should be curious.
Yeah. Our childhood experiences, memories, and like the stories that were told to us, they do influence us a lot. And yeah, like my part of me loving mythology so much is that like they used to put the Ramayana cartoon movie on Pogo and on Cartoon Network or whatever. Like this is like recently, like quarantine times, like I've watched it multiple times. But like I looked this movie up, and like
the Japanese animation, the Japanese art style animation,
yeah. That was actually because of an exchange program between Japan and India. So like Japan like to like appreciate India's thing, India's culture and diversity, they made this Ramayana movie. So it's like Japanese actual anime artists who did that.
Yes.
So you can see that in the movie where like it's all like all anime type sword fighting and all of that shit is there. So it's like so cool. And like I can imagine like, the Hanuman is my favorite character from
Same.
Ramayana, and because and the reason for that is because there's this scene where like Jambavan, like he says that you don't know the power that you actually have. Like you, when you were a child, like you were so powerful that like you went to eat the sun itself. And then Hanuman's like, really, I'm that powerful? And then, like he starts praying, and then like he gets bigger, 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 and then he starts flying. Like as a kid, like whoa, Hanuman, bro, you're the shit, bro. Like how you can fly, you're strong, and like him lighting Lanka on fire, and like that in the movie it's shown like something as playful, but like I've like read and like seen darker versions where like Hanuman is angry and like he literally burns Lanka up, right? So I've read both sides, but like it's so fun. Like what I saw that entire movie during quarantine last year sometime once again. But yeah, though that's why like things like that have like really stuck with me. And God of War 2 was the game which I played when like back in 7th grade, 8th grade on a PS2. My parents shouldn't have allowed me to play that. It's an 18 plus game, but so like that, having played that is like also like, you know, gives me a lot of memories and like why I approach stories in like in certain ways and stuff. But yeah.
Yes. It's always amazing talking to you, Vaishak. Like I love talking to you, and thank you so much for telling all your thoughts out loud, because I think there should be a healthy discussion, intellectual, like healthy sharing of intellectual thoughts to get like different perspectives on stuff. So yeah, like we all should be curious enough to know shit. So thank you so much, Vaishak, for being here.
Yeah, awesome. Good time. Stuff. But like, what people should like, I guess, like we should not forget our childhood roots and like what we, you know, what we learned back then, the stories we heard back then, like revisit them sometime, see them from a different perspective if possible, right? Like, and you know, see that, and like now I'm like doing this sort of like analysis or whatever with like the music I listen to. So like I observe the writing, the poetry in that, and it's fun. It's fun to do this. Try it out sometime. Approved, recommended.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, Vaishak. Bye, guys. If someone has come to this point, thank you.
Okay, wait. Do you want a goodbye for my puppy?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, now like I don't plan for one person. I plan for like 2 people. So it's like when you told podcast you have to record at like 1 p.m. I have to be like, okay, will I be free? But will also Milo be free to be a part of this?
Special guest.
But yeah, we're
featuring
good.
Viru.
Yeah, being a dog dad is all my life. It's all. Okay. Okay, take care everybody. Love from me and Viru. Take care. Bye.
A Sankarshan Joshi trip.